Hi everybody, my name is Tim and I'm one of the co-founders of Particula. With Particula we are building the first rating platform for so-called digitized real-world assets, starting at the intersection of sustainability and Web3. The market for the digitization, especially of illiquid assets, is one of the biggest growth markets within the next years and decades. And when we look at recent studies, like the one from the Boston Consulting Group, we can see that within the next only 7 years, we will see assets worth around $16 trillion using blockchain as an infrastructure to increase, for example, liquidity, traceability, and transparency. And this is, of course, a tremendous opportunity because imagine in 2030, 10% of the global GDP could be already tokenized. Therefore, it's definitely no surprise that financial service providers all around the world are currently exploring investment opportunities in the digital space. Recently, the Deutsche Bank, for instance, applied for the appropriate custody license for digitized assets. But when we started Particula and conducted our own market research, we spoke to over 200 industry experts, to banks, to asset managers, and to fund managers. And we identified that they currently have problems in the decision-making process. So they are in lack for data in regard to compliance, due diligence, and risk assessment processes, and they do not know how they can compare those digitized assets in a standardized way. So therefore, they are currently hesitant to fully embrace this market potential, and despite their interest to invest, they need a solution. And that's what we are doing with Particula. With Particula, we are building the first data platform and comparison tool to rate those digitized assets based on their quality. And while doing so, we're especially focusing on regulatory, security, and compliance aspects to close the information gap which was described by the various stakeholders. To do so, we created a holistic rating framework that automatically aggregates data by utilizing AI. We aggregate data out of various sources, for instance from the issuer, but also from public sources, blockchain protocols, and other independent third parties. In the first step of our framework, we are gathering the information and create a baseline transparency score. By using machine learning, we conduct an individual risk assessment and do clustering with 4 other scores in regard to the technical implementation, compliance aspects, economics, and also environmental aspects. In that phase, we already identify red flags, for instance, in the compliance phase, when there is no regulatory classification. And last but not least, we are converting the different scores into one holistic rating, ranging from AAA down to D. Our business model is a traditional subscription-based model with a modular structure, and we are mainly targeting the financial service industry. Our goal is to onboard the first 300 clients by the end of 2024, leading to an ARR of 5 million euros. When we look at our current market landscape, we can see that we are acting complement to the traditional rating industry. Within our market research, we spoke with nearly every one of them, at least the biggest 20, and they are currently focusing more on traditional equity and debt instruments, but they tend to move into the tokenized space within the next 2 up to 3 years, and this mainly through strategic acquisitions. So they are pretty interested in us, and beside that, we also see the need from well-known potential customers and are currently in the phase where our platform will be optional functioning in about 6 weeks, so we are able to onboard them as clients. Our diverse team has over 50 years of experience in relevant sectors like the software industry, the financial service sector, but also the sustainability sector. And behind us, there's already a developer team and experienced advisors out of the traditional rating industry. Over the past few weeks, we were already able to convince the first business angels and early stage VCs from our vision, and we are currently in a phase where we want to accelerate our growth. Therefore, we are looking for 1, maximize 2 additional business angels, at best with relevant experience in the financial service sector, and in the beginning of next year, we want to close our seed round. In summary, with Particula, we are building the Moody's for digitized assets, And with a gross margin of over 70%, Moody's is not for nothing one of the favorite investments of Warren Buffett. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Tim. So we will open the floor once again for any questions. I'll come over with the microphone.
How do you fill your database? Because it's indicated that you offer a database, and how do you choose what's in the base?
Yeah. We are targeting all kinds of digitized assets that have a illiquid underlying. Yeah, but to start in a very successful niche, we are currently in the intersection of sustainability and Web3. So we started with tokenized carbon because at the moment there's the most traction in that sector. We are currently seeing big companies like EY launching whole marketplaces for tokenized credits, and also the first participants like the Liechtenstein Bankers Association using those kinds of assets. Yeah? And we aggregated in the beginning for our MVP data around 1,000 tokens, carbon tokens, from over 200 projects out of those different sources. And we are currently in the process to dig deeper in other asset classes, also in the intersection of sustainability and Web3. For instance, renewable energy certificates, biodiversity certificates, project financing for solar farms, wind parks, also green bonds and impact funds. Yeah? And of course, not every data is freely available, and that's the reason why we are creating the transparency score, because this is an important matter. Since we are rating projects which are pretty new, they do not have the duty to be audited or to release information at all, and therefore, of course, transparency is an important aspect. But the bankers are sitting there.
So the bankers indeed thought that it's a brilliant idea that what you're developing here, because indeed this is exactly what we need, also especially from a regulated funds business. I don't know, do you hear me?
Yes.
From a regulated funds business, this is exactly the controls, exactly this the industry needs, and I'm happy to talk to you later.
Yeah, thank you very much. I guess before I started Particula, I was in financial market regulation consulting in regard to digital assets, yeah, and I combined big projects from banks and asset managers, for instance, for the tokenization of gold, or building infrastructure to trigger fiat currency transaction into Ethereum. Yeah, and of course, I saw the need, and that's also the reason why Particula is existing today.
How do you identify the framework you use as reference for all the different industries, and how do you catch up with changes in these frameworks and further developments?
Yeah, we started our development in relation to green bond ratings. Yeah, green bond ratings are all about transparency, governance, and environmental impact. When we started in the niche of sustainable tokenized assets, yeah, but when we dig deeper into the rating framework and also talk to our advisor, Lily, who is over 10 years ESG director at Sustainalytics, did nothing else than creating green bond ratings, we quickly realized that the rating industry are going to get together. Yeah? So ESG is an additional risk factor, and more credit ratings are also including ESG risk into their ratings. Yeah? And based on the regulatory developments in the European Union, it's also very likely that they are going together, yeah? That more and more smaller ESG ratings are getting bought. Yeah, so we oriented more into credit ratings. Yeah, you also saw the score. It's related to credit ratings because everything has a clear picture about AAA down to D. And in regard to every dimension, technology, compliance, but also transparency and economics, it's pretty the same. I guess our most pressing challenge was to look at the environmental impact. Yeah, because based on the underlying asset, it's different what you have to look at. Yeah, a carbon project is totally different than a project financing for solar park. Yeah, and of course, this was pretty challenging, but we created schemes. Yeah, so every asset class had its own scheme for the environmental aspect, and it's changing. So when somebody is going into our database, for instance, an issuer, they are clicking on their scheme. For instance, they are doing a tokenized carbon, and then there is a questionnaire popping up with 50 questions. And the environmental aspect is tailored to carbon tokens, and the rest is always the same.
And also to the industry?
Sorry?
Is it also tailored to the industry? Because I imagine you would have various branches according to the industry.
The industry where the issuer is working, or the user of the data?
Yeah.
Yeah, currently we're in the beta testing, and these are questions we ask ourselves at the moment. Yeah.
Right.
It's something a little bit tricky because we're aggregating financial data. Yeah, and through MiCA, more and more tokens become financial instruments in the next year, and therefore we have to at least raise the hand at the German BaFin that we are getting or aggregating financial data. Yeah, and only when you have raised the hand, you are able to show people through the platform. Yeah, and one additional aspect in this regard is that we are currently designing our terms and conditions. Yeah, when we build the terms and conditions in regard to the subscription model, we can define that we only want to tackle semi-professionals, professionals, and institutionals. But when we are licensing our ratings based on the decentralized structure in Web3, marketplaces can use it, and also private people can use it as an orientation. Yeah, therefore, we are currently in the phase to let Osborne Clark design our terms and conditions in that way that the marketplace is responsible for the licensing, so the display to private people. And when we have the terms and conditions, we can say to the BaFin, these are our distribution channels. We are only tackling institutional investors. And from there on, we can do the better showcase and answering all these questions. So the data is there, but of course, different stakeholders have different needs, also in displaying the data. And of course, it's really important to create a situation where somebody is able to build their own dashboards with their own functionalities and also create own graphs how they want it.